Daith da, Eubie Nagan. Welcome to podcast number 26. We've had quite a varied week this week. As well as our normal trips to the crematorium, we've actually had services in 5 parish churches, and fair distance apart really. Michaelstowe, Warlegan, Bodmin, Eglosale and Lanhydrock. Michaelstowe is the Anglo-Saxon for the holy place of St. Michael, and that church is dedicated to St. Michael and all angels. And if you look on our Facebook page and our Instagram page, I did put a photo on because there is a holy well there. It's dating back to the 12th century and is housed by, granite blocks and slate. And it's a nice little feature, really. I'd say I put the photo on, I think it was yesterday I actually uploaded it. But quite an interesting place. So that was last Friday we was up there, and then Saturday paperwork in the morning, and then we had the grandsons in the afternoon, which was brilliant. And then Sunday morning we headed up to Saltash as Mabon's football team was playing them in the cup. And Mabon was on the left wing for the first half, right wing for the second half, and she still managed to score 4 goals, which was brilliant. And our striker on Sunday, Anna, she was on fire. She scored even more than that. So they're safely through to the next round. And then on the way back, I got Beth to drop me the other side of Bodmin, and I did me long run for the week. I usually do 3 shorter runs, but on Sunday I did me 17-mile training run for the marathon, ran down to Ellen Bridge, then on the trail up to St. Breward, and then back down to Wadebridge and in around the town and back home. So 'tis all going okay, but we've got the confirmation with the funding page and everything. So James and we will be raising money for Fleet again this year. Now, some of you might not know what Fleet is, and it actually stands for the Frontline Emergency Equipment Trust. And it's been going now for decades. Norman Trebilcock, the main founder of it, working on the ambulance service, and it's a brilliant organisation. What they do, they raise funds so that they equip every ambulance in Cornwall to the same standard with the same equipment. And then since then, we've been raising money. Last time I raised money for a defibrillator. So it's all good for the people of Cornwall, and also for obviously anybody down on holiday. If they're unfortunate to be in an accident, they know when the ambulance arrives, it'll be fully equipped, and there's defibrillators being put up everywhere around Cornwall. I was talking to somebody actually this week, and jokingly I said that as a funeral director, perhaps 'tin the best thing to be raising money to save people's lives. And I said what I actually do is raise the money for the defibrillators, and then at night time when nobody's around, I go and take the batteries out. But that's just joking. But it is a fantastic organisation, and we've set up the Just Giving page. 'Tis called David and James Bray. So that's me and me oldest child. He's 33 now. So if any of you would like to give a sponsorship, that would be fantastic. As I say, the Just Giving page will be going for quite a few weeks yet, and any donation would be much appreciated. And while we're on about me children, actually, my daughter Daisy, she just started a new sideline project, which is a little body shop group. And I'll give you the title of her group in a minute, which I think you'll be able to search out. But I was a little concerned when I saw that Daisy was actually doing this thing with Body Shop, because I thought, if she's working here at a funeral director's and you've got Daisy Bray's Body Shop, I'm thinking people will think, what on earth is she selling? But thankfully, she's actually called it Daisy's Little Pamper Shop. So if you're interested in that, just get hold of Days or me or whatever. We'll try and send you the link. But could have been quite interesting, really. Undertaker with a body shop, but thankfully it's got quite a good name. over the weekend, we did have quite strong winds, and we come in Monday morning to work, and I didn't notice it right away, but after a little while, just happened to get out the window, and one of our cast iron finials from right up on top of our roof on our funeral home had actually blown back over, bounced onto the roof, and scat out a tile, bounced onto the other roof, and crashed down on the wall below. Well, thankfully, obviously, there's nobody around, and it didn't actually land where people had been walking, but it could have, well, it would have killed somebody, I reckon, if they'd been walking underneath it. But we got the builders in to look at it, and we obviously will get the roof repaired, and we are open to get the finial repaired and put back right on the top. And while we're up there, obviously, we will check the safety of the other one. And again, this is something that I did put photos up on our Facebook page and Instagram, just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But our chapel, well, as a lot of you all know, it's a big old Methodist church here in Wadebridge, and we bought it off the Methodist church quite a few years ago now. I'd say must be, 9 or 10 years, something like that. It took a few years to get sorted, but we've actually been in there 7 years now. And you can go on, I might have spoke about this before, but I will do a full podcast in the future about the ups and downs of buying the chapel. But there's a huge gallery on our Facebook page that Phil took of all the photographs following all the work right the way through. But I'll say that's for another podcast. But yeah, so you can have a gag, but it could have been quite nasty, but thankfully all was well. So then on Tuesday, it was up to Warlegan, to St Bartholomew's Church, and I always love going up there. 'Tis, well, lots of places in Cornwall so peaceful, and that's just one of them. At Warlegan, you can ride in the countryside. The only thing you can hear is bird song, and I love the trip going up there. We go up to Mount and turn left, and 'tis such a windy old Cornish road. Lots of hills up and down, lovely edging each side, covered in moss. You get the feeling it altered for hundreds of years. It's a fantastic place, and 'tis always nice to meet up. Always see John and Jill Keast up there as well. So that was our little trek on Tuesday, and then in the evening I had to do another training run up the Camel Trail, and I was running a bit late, and I always like to go up there if I can, but coming back was a bit dimity. And of course, one of the perils of running the Camel Trail is that quite a lot of horses go up and down. Our mates, they're on the other side, so they don't go up there. But the one thing you got to dodge is the piles of horse poo. Didn't a lot, you get it now and then. And of course, I was coming up. 'Twas a bit dimity, and I could see this horse poo. I thought, right, I ain't going to go round it. I'll just lift my foot and kind of hurdle it. But I didn't anticipate quite how high this pile of poo was. And I tell you what, my foot went right through it, and it spluttered everywhere. I didn't fall over or nothing, but it was quite a spectacular sight. So then on Wednesday, we was up Eglisale, and 'twas lovely. I bumped into dear Jeff Dyke up there, and we had a lovely yarn. He was telling me, reminding me of all the times years ago, the banter him and Father used to have when Father would be going into the newsagents first thing in the morning to get his paper. And he did remind me one thing, actually, that I'd forgotten. And that was when we had our old hearse that was based on the P100, he was small enough that we could keep in our garage up Glen Road. So what Father would do every morning, if we had a funeral, he would use that to take on his commute to work. And he would pull in on the Platte outside the newsagents while he went in to get his newspaper. And this was something that nobody seemed to take any notice of. I don't think we do it today. But just to explain how different Cornwall is now to back then you never locked your car. And in fact, you keep the key in the ignition while you went in the shop. And if it was a cold morning, you'd actually leave the engine running while you went and left it. So with Jeff reminding me that Father used to take theirs every morning, that triggered another memory for me, which what happened was one day Father had taken theirs, parked it outside the newsagent's while he went in to get his paper, left the key in the ignition, and when he come out, theirs was gone. And he looked around, he thought somebody had nicked it, he didn't know what to do, and then he looked across the road, and leaning up against the shop window on the other side of the road, with his arms crossed, grinning from ear to ear, was dear old Ken Warey. And while Father was in the shop, he had jumped in the hearse, driven it round the corner by the bridge on Wool, out of sight. So you can imagine the banter that pair had after that occurrence. Actually, one thing I'd better explain for those of you that don't live locally, what actually the Bridge on Wool is. And it's actually a pub here in the town, but 'tis based on the legend of how the bridge was built that we have here that's going across the River Camel. Because centuries ago, there was this town called Wade, and the other side was Eglosale. And each side, they did actually have a chapel. And what would happen would be you would go into one chapel and you'd pray for safe crossing. And when you got to the other side, you go in that one and give thanks that you'd actually reach the other bank. So what happened then? Between 1461 and 1475, the vicar here at Eglosale was called John Lovibond. And it is said that he managed to organise all the neighbouring landowners to raise the money to build a bridge that would go across the Camel. And this is where the legend comes in, that there were bales of wool that were used to stabilise the deep mud that was in the riverbed for the foundations of the bridge. But there is another explanation, that it was actually the profits of the wool trade that helped to build the bridge. The bridge have appeared in history a few times over the years. I think back in the 1500s, I think there was a Catholic priest was executed at Lanson. He was supporting the Pope against Elizabeth I. And I think he was hung, drawn and quartered. And I think part of his body was actually put on display on the bridge. And then also Oliver Cromwell come to Wade Bridge in 1646. And he actually held the bridge with his troops. So, there's been a few times that it have been mentioned. And also, I did read the other day that the first car that was recorded in Wade Bridge that crossed the bridge was in 1901. But there's been a lot of cars that have crossed it since, and the bridge have been widened as well, I think a couple of times over the years. But that's where Bridge on Wool comes from. And on the pub, I still think they got the sign. They have it in English, but then they have it in Cornish underneath, which I think is Ponswar Glan, which is Bridge on Wool. So that's a little bit of history about the bridge. But yeah, it did bring back memories. Thanks to Jeff for that. I can remember when I started working with Father in the summer, 'twould be boiling hot. You'd pull up outside Bridgend with a nice wide pavement there, and you'd leave the keys in the ignition, all the windows down. Well, like I say, you wouldn't do it today. So then Wednesday evening, I had a bit of a rush. By the time I got home, quick tea, and then 'twas to whip out to St Austell. And obviously, over the past few weeks, you've got the Rugby Six Nations, but as we all know, the Six Nations is just the warm-up act for the main event in the rugby world, which is the County Championship. And on Wednesday, it was the Tamar Cup at St Austell, Cornwall versus Devon. So I was running behind anyway, but of course, what I forgot was as I got out towards Lockingate, they got roadworks on. So I turned round and then I had to go round Roach. But I actually turned up at the ground at 7:25, just in time for the kick-off at 7:30. And I just walked round the side of the pitch and then I heard somebody shout over to me, and that was dear Terry Simmons and his lovely wife Susie. So I stood with they, and actually it was lovely because second half, Aaron actually scored a try. But the first half, it was a tightish affair. We did a lot of defending, but we went in at half-time 12-0 up. But then it changed a bit in the second half, and Cornwall actually won 45-0. So it was a good evening was had by all. Actually, while I'm thinking about rugby, we actually, RJ Bray and Son, we do sponsor the local Camels here, the rugby club in Wadebridge. And what I love, I don't know if I'm sure they did do it on purpose, I don't know. But we've got our advertising board, and 'tis right next to where the players run onto the pitch. And obviously the local Wadebridge boys, they would just run on. But I think 'tis a lovely thought for any opposing team that are playing the Camels, that the last thing they see as they run onto that pitch for the game is your local Undertakers. So then on Thursday, we was in St. Petrock's Church in Bodmin. Very impressive church, inside and out. I don't know if you've ever been in there before, but it is actually the biggest parish church in Cornwall. And I got a lovely photo somewhere. I must try and put that one up, of Father when he was in St. John Ambulance years ago, with Grampy stood one side and Jack Pierce stood the other in the colour party, with the St. John Ambulance flag stood there on the chancel steps of the church. Fantastic photo. I say I must dig that one out. And then today, yet another impressive setting, St. Idroch's Church at Lanidroch. And this church is situated, it's adjacent to Lanidroch House, and 'tis a lovely setting. Lanidroch House itself, that is now owned by the National Trust, and I know they get thousands of visitors every year, but if you've never been, if you're ever down this way in Cornwall, 'tis well worth a visit. So that was pretty much my week, really. I don't want to go on too long, I don't want to bore you, really, but I hope it was a little bit interesting. I've already done me Cornish words for the week with the Bridge on Wall. But I was thinking this week, I was talking to somebody and I said something in dialect and they pretty laughed. And I thought, well, perhaps I might mix it up a bit, that some weeks I will have Cornish words, but other times I will use Cornish dialect, because that's something that's really dying out. And I can remember when I was young, being our families, both sides obviously was Cornish through generations. So they'd be talking and you'd be hearing things which you didn't realise was just from down here. You just thought that everybody spoke it. In fact, I can remember when I went out to St. Austell Sixth Form, I went out there and some of them out there was taking the mickey out of me for my Cornish accent. And well, I thought, that's all right. And then after a while, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm still in Cornwall here. But anyway, that's beside the point. And of course, then when I started working with Father, well, the bearers we had back then, 'twas all like extra granddads, you know, 'twas fantastic. I mean, I'm thinking about Bill Walk, Charlie Brooks, all of them right through, Ron Crethu, Johnny Ferret, Gordy, the whole lot of them, the dialect that some of them would come out with, oh, it would be fantastic. So I thought I'd perhaps use a few sayings, I'd put them in and out, because to be sad, really, if they do die out. There are a few that I know that perhaps wouldn't be appropriate on here. I don't want to become an X-rated channel, but there might be a few that might be a little bit close to the mark that I might manage to squeeze in. But I was thinking the one I would use today, I can remember the first time I heard it, being a young teenager. One of my cousins, David, he used to pop in and see us quite often. And if he was working in Wadebridge, he'd come round, he'd have his dinner with us. And he was talking once to me when I was a teenager, advising to stay single. He's going on about the financial perils of actually getting tied up with a woman. And basically, his advice went along the lines of, don't you go chasing their maids, because they'll bring rags to your ass and small pasties for dinner. And with they wise words, I'll see you next week. Wish ye well. Do Guinness.